I'm going to speak to a little bit about a particular view I get of Nick for a long time now. But I'll start with the fact that we met in January 2005.
At 57, Keith Urban stands as a man whose voice and guitar have echoed across the world. Yet behind the spotlight lies a story far more haunting than most fans know. He is a country icon, a Grammy-winning artist, and a husband to Nicole Kidman. But his path to glory was never paved with gold. It was carved from fire, silence, and scars that refuse to fade. His journey is not just about music, it is about survival, redemption, and carrying wounds too deep for the stage lights to reveal. This is the heartbreaking tragedy of Keith Urban. Keith Urban wasn't just born into music, he was forged by it. From the quiet town of Whangarei in New Zealand to the sprawling plains of Australia, his early years were shaped less by applause and more by instability. His family constantly uprooted, searching for better beginnings that never seemed to arrive. What kept him steady was not comfort, but a sound. His father adored country music, playing records that filled their modest home with voices of faraway legends. Keith absorbed every note, every twang, every lyric. Yet, while music felt like a gift, life around him often felt like chaos. Moving to Caboolture, Queensland, was supposed to bring peace, but life soon proved harsher than imagined. At 9 years old, Keith faced a tragedy that would mark him forever. Their family home was devoured by flames, reducing every belonging, every memory, to ash. In that moment, he learned the fragility of stability. He would later say that all they had left was the kindness of strangers who showed up with clothes and food. But as the smoke cleared, another more enduring fire smoldered within him, the drive to find something unshakable. For Keith, that anchor was music. It became not just his passion, but his purpose. The fire outside was only a glimpse of the storms within. Behind closed doors, Keith grew up under the shadow of a father whose love was intertwined with volatility. Robert Bob Urban loved country music with a passion, but he also battled alcoholism with equal force. Keith often recalled how the man who gave him his first guitar never once told him he loved him. Imagine a child's silence filling the spaces where affection should have been. Instead of warmth, there were fists, mood swings, and words that cut deeper than any wound. The contradiction was unbearable. His father pushed him toward music, yet failed to give him the affection every child craves. A sign placed in their shop window, seeking a guitar teacher for Keith, became both a salvation and a reminder of what was missing. That small act of care led him to Sue McCarthy, a teacher who nurtured his gift. Still, no matter how well he played, Keith carried the weight of knowing that applause from strangers came easier than love from his own father. Those years of silence and fear etched themselves into his soul. They became scars that music alone had to soothe. And though he found moments of hope in melodies, the truth was clear. His childhood left him with wounds that would take decades to heal. Music, in the midst of this chaos, became more than a talent. It was survival. At just 4 years old, he strummed a ukulele. By 6, he gripped a guitar as if it were armor. In a household dominated by silence and sudden eruptions, his instrument became his voice. Every note was a confession he couldn't speak aloud. Every chord was an escape from loneliness. He immersed himself in Tamworth country festivals, soaking in the energy, pretending for a moment that applause meant safety. By his teenage years, he was performing in smoky pubs, places no child belonged, but where he felt strangely alive. His parents, for all their struggles, drove him from gig to gig, as though his success might redeem them too. Yet, no matter how loud the applause, Keith confessed it never filled the emptiness he carried. He once said, "Music saved me. It gave me somewhere to go when home didn't feel like home." That raw admission summed up his reality. Music wasn't optional, it was essential. It was the difference between despair and survival. Each performance was more than entertainment. It was a lifeline. And though the world saw a prodigy, behind those chords was a boy simply trying to breathe. But the path forward was anything but smooth. After clawing his way out of a childhood marred by trauma, Keith's early career tested every ounce of resilience he had built. Fame was never immediate. It was elusive, taunting him at the edges of smoky stages and local TV appearances. At 15, he was already a seasoned performer, but his world was still confined to small towns and fleeting recognition. His sound, an electrifying blend of rock and country, made him unique but difficult to market. In 1990, he released his debut album in Australia, but it barely registered beyond local fans. For most, that might have been enough. For Keith, it wasn't even close. In 1992, he made the bold leap to Nashville, leaving behind family, friends, and any sense of security. He arrived with nothing but his guitar and a dream too heavy to abandon. But Nashville was unforgiving. Doors slammed, opportunities dissolved, nights were long and empty. He played guitar in the background for others, wrote songs that bore his name in shadows, and endured rejection after rejection. His band, The Ranch, showed promise but failed commercially. Keith admitted there were nights he thought he wasn't meant to make it, yet he didn't stop. He couldn't. Music was his oxygen, and he refused to suffocate. After 7 years of persistence, he finally released his American debut in 1999. And when his single, "But for the Grace of God," soared to #1, it wasn't just success, it was vindication. It was the sound of survival, transformed into triumph. Fame didn't drift into Keith Urban's life like a soft breeze. It crashed in like a thunderstorm that had been waiting years to break loose. When his American debut album landed in 1999, the single, "But for the Grace of God," soared to #1. For the boy from Queensland who had once doubted whether music would save him, it was proof that all the pain, all the rejection, all the empty nights in Nashville had not been for nothing. But success didn't silence the echoes of his past. It magnified them. The stages were larger, the crowds louder, but the loneliness was just as sharp. Keith found himself struggling with impostor syndrome, a gnawing voice that told him he didn't belong at the top. Even as his 2002 hit "Somebody Like You" became the biggest country hit of the decade, Keith felt trapped between adoration and emptiness. Fans screamed his name, yet he often felt more isolated than ever. Awards piled up, Grammys, CMAs, ACMs, but they became both triumphs and burdens. He pushed himself harder, desperate to prove he deserved it, even as old habits loomed dangerously close. Nights blurred into mornings, the weight of expectation pressing down, and Keith often turned to self-destructive escapes. On stage he was radiant, but offstage he was unraveling. His story during this time was one of paradox, a man who had everything the world thought he wanted, yet felt more haunted than ever. Fame, it seemed, had given him the crown, but deepened the cracks in his soul. And then came the light he didn't expect. In 2005, at a Hollywood gala brimming with stars and flashing cameras, Keith Urban met Nicole Kidman. To the outside world, it was a glamorous pairing, a country superstar and a Hollywood icon. But for Keith, it was far more than romance. Nicole didn't see the image, the fame, or the carefully polished veneer. She saw the man beneath, the broken boy still trying to heal from years of silence and fists. Their bond was quiet at first. Keith, overwhelmed with awe, took months to gather the courage to call her. Yet once he did, their connection grew with depth, not spectacle. A year later, in 2006, they were married in Sydney, under candlelight and surrounded by hope. The world saw it as a fairy tale. Keith saw it as salvation. But barely 4 months into their marriage, tragedy resurfaced. Keith relapsed, drowning in the same demons he thought he had conquered. Nicole, refusing to lose him, staged an intervention. With love and unwavering compassion, she urged him into the Betty Ford Center. This time, it wasn't just for himself. It was for the woman who refused to let go. That choice marked a turning point. In later interviews, Keith would admit he truly began living the day he married Nicole. Their love wasn't perfect, but it was redemptive. It became his anchor, the one force strong enough to pull him back from the brink. Fatherhood became the next chapter of his healing. In 2008, the couple welcomed their first daughter, Sunday Rose. For Keith, her arrival was not just joyous, it was humbling. Holding her in his arms, he realized he had been given a chance to become the father he had longed for as a child. 2 years later, in 2010, Faith Margaret was born via surrogate, completing their family. For Keith, these little girls weren't just children. They were redemption, a chance to rewrite the story of love he had been denied. Suddenly, life wasn't about chasing validation on stage. It was about reading bedtime stories, making breakfast, and finding joy in simple moments. Music no longer served as an escape. It became a celebration. Keith poured his emotions into albums like Defying Gravity and Fuse, works that brimmed with hope, love, and gratitude. Every lyric was a tribute to the family who grounded him, every chord a promise that he would never repeat the cycles of his past. Being present became his mission. Sobriety was no longer a burden. It was a gift he wanted to protect for his wife and daughters. He often said fatherhood gave him perspective, forcing him to step out of the shadows of his childhood and into the light of being the parent he once desperately needed. The man who had once been lost in his own chaos was now guiding 2 little girls into a life of stability, safety, and love. Sobriety didn't just give Keith Urban back his life, it gave him peace. For years, addiction had haunted him like an echo of his father's battles. But now, he stood on the other side, clear-eyed and grounded. He no longer reached for the bottle. Instead, he reached for meditation, journaling, and music. His daily rituals became simple but sacred. Time in his gym, moments cooking with his daughters, quiet reflections where he scribbled down lyrics or painted in silence. This balance wasn't just recovery, it was reinvention. Professionally, he continued to soar. His albums went platinum, his tours sold out stadiums, and his stint as an American Idol judge introduced him to millions of new fans. Yet he never let success consume him the way it once had. Instead of chasing applause, he focused on authenticity. Songs like those in his 2024 album High revealed a man who had grown into wisdom, embracing vulnerability instead of hiding it. He wasn't just creating music, he was mentoring younger artists, encouraging them to face their demons and find their truth. Financially, his career flourished, but Keith remained grounded, choosing to live with meaning rather than spectacle. For him, sobriety wasn't about denying himself. It was about finally being free. At 57, Keith Urban is no longer defined only by the glitter of country music fame. He is something greater, a man who has carved peace out of chaos. Once fueled by the need to prove himself, he now lives in the quiet rhythm of family and self-acceptance. His world stretches across continents, from the warmth of their Nashville mansion to the rolling fields of Sutton Forest in Australia, and the ocean views of their Sydney penthouse. Each home is not a symbol of wealth, but of sanctuary, spaces where laughter rings louder than applause, and love outshines the brightest spotlight. His daily life is far simpler than most would imagine for a superstar. Keith often cooks hearty Italian meals with his daughters, finding joy in the kitchen instead of on the stage. He takes long, unhurried walks with Nicole, the partner who once stood in the fire with him until he found his way out. He paints in solitude, using color as meditation, turning stillness into art. His estimated fortune may surpass $75 million, but he measures success in sobriety, serenity, and the closeness of his family. These are treasures no award could ever replace. Fans still pack stadiums to hear his voice, and his records continue to sell across the globe. Yet Keith himself no longer chases validation. The boy who once sought love through music has finally learned that love was waiting for him at home. His legacy now is not only Grammy trophies, chart-topping singles, or sold-out tours. It is the life he rebuilt after fire, trauma, and addiction tried to silence him. Keith Urban today is not just a legend of country music. He is a survivor, a father, and a man who has finally mastered the art of living. Keith Urban's story is one of the most striking examples of how tragedy and triumph can exist within the same life. At 57, he carries scars that will never fully disappear. The fire that consumed his childhood home, the silence of a father who couldn't say "I love you," the relentless battle against addiction. These chapters could have destroyed him. For many, they would have. Yet Keith turned pain into poetry, wounds into rhythm, and heartbreak into a legacy that resonates far beyond country music. His tragedy is not just in what he endured, but in how deeply it shaped him. Without those storms, there may have been no Keith Urban, the artist whose voice could bring millions to tears. Today, his greatest achievements are not the awards, the sold-out tours, or even the fortune he has built. They are the quiet victories: his sobriety, his marriage that survived the darkness, his role as a father who chooses presence over absence. Keith Urban's journey reminds us that resilience is not about escaping the past, but learning to live with it, honor it, and build something greater from it. His story is heartbreaking, yes, but it is also breathtakingly human. And if this story has moved you, if it has reminded you of the power of love, resilience, and second chances, then take a moment to honor Keith Urban's journey. Hit the like button, share this video with others, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more stories that dive beneath the spotlight into the lives behind the legends.